I wake to the familiar tickle of a maggot crawling out of my right eye. Lovely. That's how you know it's morning aboard a plague fleet vessel. Not from a cheerful alarm or a cock's crow, but from the little wriggling reminders that something in your skull is rotten. I blink the crust away and flick the maggot off my cheek. It lands with a wet plip on the floor beside my bunk. I'll probably see it later again, perhaps in my breakfast. Who knows? On the blessed filth, that's the affectionate name of this ship I call home, surprises like that are just part of the daily routine. As I sit up, the stench hits me anew, though by the Emperor's rotten bowels, you'd think I'd be used to it by now. It's the smell of old death and fresh decay, of rusted metal and moldy flesh, all blending into a perfume that would make a corpse taster gag. To me, it's the smell of morning, the sweet musk of another day aboard our beautiful plague barge. I swing my legs over the side of the bunk, careful not to step on the pile of something squishy on the deck. Might be the remains of my bunkmate. He died in the night, I recall. Not that death is much of an excuse to skip work around here. He'll be up and shambling soon enough once the pox reanimates him, or we'll scoop what's left into a sack and toss it into the compost heap in the lower holds. Waste not, want not, Grandfather Nurgle teaches us that. As soon as Dakaris tromps off, I turn to the remains of my unfortunate bunkmate. The poor wretch is more sludge than man after whatever took him in the night. With Grim's help, I roll the sticky corpse into a mildewed blanket and tie it off with a length of frayed cord. We'll drop him down the corpse chute on the way out, I mutter. No ceremony, no last rites, just practical disposal. The compost heap in the lower holds, really a massive maggot pit, will take care of him. A couple of Nurglings gather, sniffing eagerly at the bundle, but I shoo them away for now. Breakfast comes later, you little fiends. There's an almost comical routine to this, cleaning up your dead bunkmate like taking out the trash. Waste not, want not after all. From somewhere down the corridor comes the clanging peal of the morning bell, or what passes for one. It's actually a rusted brass bell recovered from some plague-ridden shrine, and every time it tolls, a spray of corrosive slime splatters out of the cracks in it, the ship's way of saying, "Rise and shine." The bell's muffled gong echoes through the bulkheads, followed by the usual hacking coughs and groans of the crew stirring to wakefulness. I pull on my grease-stiffened trousers and threadbare coat, doing my best to shake off the mildew. The fabric is damp, perpetually, and speckled with black mold. Probably toxic, but then again, so is everything here, including the air. I'm long past worrying about a little mold on my clothes. When your lungs themselves are half mold, you stop caring. Speaking of lungs, I clear my throat and spit a wad of phlegm onto the floor. It sizzles, must have been some acidic bile mixed in this time. It eats a tiny pockmark into the metal decking. I'll hear about that later from the bosun if he notices. "Quit corroding my decks, you filth," he'll yell, then inevitably start coughing up his own lungs mid-scold. The bosun has a real passion for maintaining the ship, but there's only so much you can do when the vessel itself is literally rotting and alive with infection. I sometimes think our blessed filth likes a little self-decoration and uses our spit and vomit to add new patterns on the floor. A creative ship, to be sure. I hear movement above me, other bunks creaking. A raspy voice from the upper rack croaks, "Morning, sunshine," in my direction. It's Grim, one of the only other humans in this section who still has enough of a mind left to form sentences. I can hear the grin in his voice. Always chipper, that guy. "Morning, Grim," I reply, voice still hoarse. I reach over and give his bunk frame a friendly kick. A shower of dust and paint flecks, or perhaps dried scabs, hard to tell, drifts down. Grim cackles, a wet bubbling sound. "Another day in paradise, eh?" he wheezes. Paradise? Sure, I snort softly as I stand. My back makes a cracking sound as I straighten up, vertebrae popping. I stretch my arms until a couple of my joints dislocate with soft pops, then slot back in. Got to stay limber. The ship likes to throw surprises that require flexibility, like ducking sudden tentacles that sprout from the walls, or jumping over random pools of ooze that weren't there yesterday. Paradise. Yes, this is our heaven. A big, rusted, plague-infested heaven drifting through the stars. And strangely enough, we've all gotten rather fond of it. I step into the aisle between bunks, nearly slipping on what I now realize is a slick of mucus on the floor. There's always some bodily fluid underfoot here. You learn to keep your balance in ways no voidsman on a clean Navy ship ever would. I catch myself on the edge of another bunk, apologizing to its occupant, a tangle of limbs named Sorgan, who might still be asleep or possibly dead. Hard to tell when his face has melted into the pillow. No response from Sorgan. A greenish tongue lolls out of what might be a mouth. I'll assume he's not feeling talkative. Other crew around us are rising, a couple of scabby men and women, and a few things that once were men, but have changed a bit more. Like old Bren across the aisle, whose left arm is now a Kitina's claw, and who has an extra eye blinking in his forehead. He gives me a vacant stare and drools as I nod to him. Friendly guy, just not all there upstairs since the last bout of brainworms. "All right, you sorry lot, up and at 'em," comes a shout from the doorway. It's Decaris, our section overseer, doing his rounds. He's a burly figure silhouetted against the sickly yellow lumen light of the hall. The glow globes overhead are tinted by some algal growth, casting everything in a pus-colored hue. Decaris's outline is imposing. He was big even before the blessings of Nurgle swelled him further. A chain of office, or perhaps chains from a manacle set repurposed as a symbol of authority, hangs over his shoulder. I can see the swarm of flies that constantly follows him, buzzing around his boil-pocked head like a halo of pestilence. He steps into the bunk room and the floorboards squelch under his heavy boots. Something bursts underfoot with a soft pop, probably one of the fat slugs that infest the dark corners. Decaris doesn't care. He glares around, one eye milky white, the other bloodshot but sharp. "Get your arses moving. Duty shift starts in 5 minutes. If you're not at your stations, I'll feed what's left of you to the maggot pits." His tone is half snarl, half fatherly scold. He enjoys motivating us with threats of punishment that are only partly in jest. We know he wouldn't actually waste good meat on the maggot pits unless someone was truly useless. But we get the message. "Aye, aye, sir," I call back with a lazy salute, wiping my pus-stained hand off on my trousers first, so I don't fling droplets at him. Decaris hates when we fling filth on him, mostly because he has some open sores that sting when certain fluids hit them. Learned that last week when one of us sneezed on his exposed belly. That earned the poor sod a backhand that knocked 3 teeth out. Not that teeth last long here anyway. Decaris grunts, satisfied enough that we're moving. He steps out to the next compartment to roust more crew, shouting something about how if he finds anyone fused to their beds again, he'll personally tear them loose. Sometimes, you see, the ship likes to grow fleshy tendrils that wrap around a sleeper's limbs in the night. A gentle embrace, really, but it can make one late for roll call if you're stuck peeling it off. Grim pulls himself upright in his bunk, one hand on his distended belly. He gives me a mock salute. I notice one of his fingernails has fallen off again. It skitters to the floor. He glances at it and shrugs. "Well, guess I didn't need that one anyway," he chuckles. I manage a grin. It's good to keep a sense of humor. Honestly, it's either laugh or cry in a place like this, and crying just wastes moisture you might need later. We shuffle out of the barracks toward our stations, joining the trickle of other crew from adjacent rooms. The hallway is narrow and low-ceilinged, with pipes running along the edges dripping condensation. I hope it's water, but given the brownish tint, likely not. The metal walls are corroded and pitted. Here and there, fleshy fungal growths patch the bulkheads where rust has eaten through entirely, like scabs covering wounds in the ship's body. As we walk, a small Nurgling scampers by underfoot, a little demonic creature resembling a hairless, bumpy gremlin. It giggles in a childlike way as it darts between our legs, clutching something slimy in its claws. Emperor knows what organ that is, but it's fresh. One of the newer lads recoils from it, instinctively must be his first week awakening to find Nurglings underfoot. Grim and I just step aside to let it pass. "Watch it, little friend," I murmur, as it nearly trips me. The Nurgling looks up with glowing eyes, tongue lolling, then skitters off into a vent shaft with its prize. Probably going to go clog some machinery with that thing. The little pests love causing mischief, but they're considered good luck on this ship. Better to have them playing around than some other chaos spawn, believe me. We reach a junction where the corridor intersects a larger passageway known as Clotway 9. The ship has quaint nicknames for its main halls. Here, a few lumens still function, so it's brighter, revealing the full palette of decay in our surroundings. The floor plating is mostly rust-red and black, with streaks of ooze. A broken servo-skull drone buzzes weakly overhead, its once white skull now green with lichen. It tries to project a morning hymn from its Vox grill, a leftover habit from its Imperial programming, but the sound warps into a gargling chant that echoes off the walls. Something about "Blessed be the bowels of the grandfather," before the recording cuts out in a burst of static. I smile at that. Even the old machine spirits are learning our songs. At this point, some of the crew break off toward the mess to grab whatever passes as breakfast, while others head straight to duty if they're on first shift. My stomach rumbles, or maybe that's the parasite gnawing inside it, who can tell, and I figure I have a minute or two to snatch a bite. So I follow the scent of something. Cooking? Let's say cooking loosely. The mess hall is just an alcove off Clotway 9, a place where a few cauldrons are set up over heating vents. As I step inside, I see a half-dozen of my comrades already slurping from wooden bowls or dented metal cans. The ship's cook well, we call him Cookie, ironically, is stirring one cauldron with a ladle that might once have been a repurposed entrenching tool. He's an enormously fat man, or woman, unclear under all those boils. With so many cysts on his face, it's like a topographical map of plague. A cloud of flies swirls around the cauldron, occasionally landing on his sweaty, pallid flesh. Each time he stirs, the concoction inside releases a puff of steam that reeks of spoiled meat and garlic. "Breakfast of champions," Grim mutters at my shoulder as we queue up. In the pot, I can make out floating chunks of something chunky and gray. Might be last night's leftover corpse gruel. Protein is protein. Cookie sees us and grunts. "Bowl?" he asks in a voice like phlegm in a churn. I grab a somewhat clean tin cup from a stack, clean meaning only mildly stained with grease. I hold it out and Cookie slops a ladle of stew-like substance into it. A couple of eyeballs bob to the surface amid the gray-brown gravy and unidentified meat shreds. One eyeball is looking right at me, I swear. I wink at it out of habit. Waste not, want not. I pop it into my mouth. It's squishy and bitter. Needs salt. Grim gets his portion and we lean against a wall to eat quickly. The stew is not the worst I've had. Slightly gamey, a hint of rot, but spiced with some herbs that actually cut the edge off the decay. Maybe thyme or hemlock from the hydro garden, 2 decks down. In fact, this is downright gourmet compared to a batch we had last year. That time, one of Cookie's assistants accidentally tipped a barrel of plague fly eggs into the pot. We all wondered why the stew was crunchier than usual, until a horde of fat larvae started boiling over. Ha! It gave live cooking a new meaning. Poor Cookie was mortified and mildly chewed on. Still, most of us finished our bowls. A little extra protein never hurts. While we eat, another crewman stumbles in, looking a bit frantic. I recognize him, Jory, I think his name is. Newer recruit, came aboard only a month ago from a captured Imperial transport. His eyes still have a bit of that panicked humanity in them, though the black veins spreading across his face show Nurgle's touch taking hold. He rushes to Cookie, breathless. "Please, might I have some before it's all gone?" he pleads, reaching for a bowl. Cookie just shrugs and obliges with a ladleful. Jory's trembling hands can barely hold the bowl as he lifts it. He practically inhales the stuff, slurping desperately. Poor sod must still be at the stage where hunger feels like hunger. Eventually, either the parasites or the blessings numb that, or you learn not to care. As Jory chugs the broth, I see a small tentacle suddenly poke out from the collar of his jumpsuit near his neck, writhing a moment before retreating under the fabric. He winces and almost drops his bowl. Grim notices too and pats Jory on the shoulder with his gnarled hand. "First one?" Grim asks, nodding at the tentacle that disappeared. Jory looks at him, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and strange excitement. Yes, I woke up and it was there. It stings." "Ah, you'll get used to it," means Grandfather Nurgle smiles on you, Grim says, sounding almost envious. "My first was a fingernail that grew back as a claw. Hurt like hell, but after it fell off the third time, it grew in proper." He shows the lad a finger missing its nail, the same one that fell off earlier this morning. "It'll come back again. Stronger." Jory nods uncertainly and musters a half-smile. If you say so." I finish my stew and wipe my mouth on my sleeve. Time to actually do my job. I'm part of the maintenance crew for the starboard gun decks, which means I get to check on rusted cannon batteries and make sure they're capable of spewing filth at our enemies when needed. A glamorous role? Hardly. But I was a mechanic in the Guard once, a lifetime ago, so they figured I'd be handy with a spanner, even if that spanner is now mostly used to knock fungus off shell loaders. "I'd better get to my station," I say to Grim. "First shift won't run itself." He slurps the last of his stew, wiping a maggot off his lip casually. "Aye, Emperor forbid we disappoint the captain," he jokes, barely concealing the sarcasm at mention of the Emperor. We both chuckle darkly. The Emperor means less than nothing to us now, a distant memory of a corpse god that never cared. We've got a new patron who at least gives us a kind of purpose, even if that purpose is being the universe's disease vector. We toss our empty bowls aside, a Nurgling will probably collect them later to lick clean, and head out of the mess. Clotway 9 is filling with more foot traffic now, dozens of human crew and a couple of towering figures moving among them, plague marines in full armor. Whenever one of those giants appears, we lowly mortals press ourselves to the sides of the corridor to give them passage. Not out of strict discipline, so much as simple self-preservation. You don't want to get underfoot of a 9-foot-tall, half-ton superhuman in corroded ceramite plate. One such Astartes trudges past now. His armor is the color of diseased bile, trimmed in rusted bronze spikes, dripping sludge from every joint. The air around him buzzes with flies, and the floorboards leave sticky footprints of ooze as he goes. I catch a glimpse of his helmet. A single horn juts from one side, and where the other eye lens should be, there's just a cracked hole oozing glowing pus. I think I see a glitter of a real eye looking out from that socket, baleful and lidless. He makes a sound, something between a laugh and a cough, as he shoulders through the cluster of us. There's an aura of power and decay around him that makes my teeth ache. Or maybe that's just one of my last teeth finally loosening. When he's gone, conversation slowly resumes among the crew. It's always a mix of awe and terror when one of the Death Guard walks by. They are our masters, our warlords. Once upon a time, I would have been awestruck by Space Marines as heroic figures. Now, these ones are far from heroic by Imperial standards, but Emperor help me, I feel a twisted kind of admiration for them. They are living, rotting legends of plague and war. They are what I could never be, powerful, fearless, and nearly indestructible. We unchanged, as they ironically call us humans who serve them, are fragile in comparison. But we have our role. Grim peels off toward the bilge pumps. His duty this week is clearing clogs in the bilge, a foul task even by our standards, but he manages. We share a quick nod and he flashes me a mostly toothless smile. "Catch you at lights out, friend, if we don't drown in holy filth before then," he jests. I grin back. "If the filth doesn't kill us, nothing will." A common saying among us, delivered with equal parts humor and fatalism. We wave and part ways. I head down a different corridor toward the gun deck maintenance hatch. As I go, I'm largely alone. Most others have split off to their sections. It's just me and the dripping pipes, and the distant throb of engines for now. The corridors I wander through are quieter at this hour. Only the distant throb of engines and an occasional metal groan accompany me. A few glow globes sputter overhead, their sickly light filtered through veils of growing mold. Underfoot, the deck plating is soft in spots, carpeted by mats of spongy lichen that squelch with each step. The air tastes a bit less foul away from the crowded decks, but a tang of mildew is ever present. I pass a leaking conduit that drizzles phosphorescent ooze down the bulkhead, tracing patterns like Nurgle's three-ringed fly symbol in luminescent green. The ship itself is alive in its way, a patchwork of metal and organic rot fused together over centuries. In places, the walls even beat with a slow pulse, as if a giant heart circulates pus through its veins. It's almost cozy once you get used to it. These sights and smells, which would break a saner mind, now lull me towards sleep. Most of those not on duty are trying to snatch some rest or engaging in whatever passes for leisure here, placing bets on whose tumor will burst next, perhaps. But not me. Not now. I've got work to do. I climb a ladder and push open the hatch to the starboard gun maintenance bay. A waft of chemical fumes greets me. The dark Mechanicus adepts must be up early mixing solvent for the cannons. The bay is a long chamber running along the ship's flank, with a series of massive gun housings protruding through the wall into space. Each gun is an artillery piece capable of launching shells, or worse. These beauties have names like Pockspitter and Sorrow's Breath scrawled on them in corrosion. My favorite gun, the one I personally keep, is called Old Grin. Someone long ago painted a smiling skull on its barrel, and miraculously the image remains, stained but visible. "Morning, Old Grin," I whisper as I pass the colossal gun barrel. I run a hand along its slimy metal surface affectionately. The plating is damp and pitted. A bit of it flakes off in my palm, whoops. Probably needed that piece. I'll patch it later. "Acolyte, over here, now!" A sharp voice beckons from near the second gun mount. I know that voice, Magos Guret, one of the Dark Mechanicum tech adepts assigned to our ship's batteries. A fancy title for a man who's basically a walking collection of metal limbs and diseases in equal measure. I approach. Gurat is perched atop a servo lift, examining one of the gun's breech mechanisms. He looks less human every time I see him. His lower body is a cluster of spider-like mechanical legs clamped to the side of the gun assembly. His upper body is cloaked in oily robes inscribed with unholy litanies of chaos. Where his face should be, there's a ventilator mask studded with blinking lights, and at least 2 tendrils or tubes snake from under the hood, pulsing with vile fluids. He might not even have a face anymore under there, for all I know. "You called, Magos?" I say, giving a respectful half-bow. One must show deference to the tech priests. They commune with the ship's spirit and the plague machines, and they can make your life especially miserable if they want. Coolant pressure in Battery 2's recoil system is at 40%. Too low, Gurat rasps through his Vox grill, which turns his voice into a metallic buzz. "I need it at 60% at least. The last volley we fired shook loose some tubing, I suspect. You will go inside and fix it." By inside, he means inside the gun's casing, a tight, dark crawl space around the massive barrel and hydraulic pistons. But I've done it before, I nod. "Yes, Magos." He stares, or at least I think he's staring, hard to tell with that mask, for a moment, then adds, "And mind the nest." "Nest, sir," I echo, though I have a sinking feeling what he means. He clacks one of his mechadendrites impatiently. "The fly nest in the coolant reservoir. It's clogging the lines. Clear it, but do not damage it entirely. The captain likes the flies. Of course he does." The captain, or rather our warband's champion in charge, sees the ship's infestations as blessings to be preserved where possible. So we maintenance crew have to find a balance, remove enough of the filth that the machines run, but not so much that we offend the plague god by cleaning too thoroughly. It's an absurd line to walk, but such is life here. "I'll be careful," I assure Gurat. He waves a claw dismissively and turns away, already engrossed in monitoring some data slate readout, likely forgetting my existence entirely. I climb onto the gun platform and open a service hatch. A waft of stagnant, sweet-sour air rushes out. Sweet as in sickly sweet, like rotting fruit and curdled milk. My lamp pack flickers on. I carry a small light on my tool belt. The interior of the gun housing is cramped, barely a crawl space encircling the enormous breech and recoil tubes. I squeeze in, tools clanking softly at my belt. Immediately, a few fat black flies buzz out past my head, disturbed by the intrusion. I wave them off and crawl deeper. Inside, the metal walls are slick with condensation and perhaps gore from when the gun vents. I find the coolant lines. One of them is indeed loose, dripping greenish fluid. And next to it, oh joy, the nest. It's a large clump of fibrous gunk stuck to a corner, hardened mucus and who knows what, studded with clusters of fly eggs and writhing larvae. The flies have made a nice home here, blocking a coolant intake grate. Fluorescent coolant fluid is seeping around the edges that explains the pressure drop. I gently prod the nest with a screwdriver. A bunch of maggots spill out, plopping into the puddle of coolant below. The mass jiggles, but holds. Now, how to do this without damaging it entirely? I suspect if I remove all of it, Gurat or the captain will complain I've killed the sacred flies or something. So I need to clear just enough that the coolant can flow, but leave enough nest intact. This is the sort of maintenance problem they don't teach you in the Imperial textbooks. With a sigh, I take a deep breath, instantly regretting it as I inhale the fruity rot stink, and get to work. Using a hooked wire, I carefully carve a small channel through the nest. Squirming larvae squelch under my tool, and a wave of adult flies bursts out around my face, tickling my ears and cheeks. I keep my mouth clamped shut, lesson learned early. Never do this with your mouth open unless you fancy a belly full of bugs. It's painstaking, gross work, but after a minute or two I manage to clear the vent grate well enough. Coolant starts flowing more freely. The pressure gauge, visible on my side panel, creeps up slowly. Good. The rest of the nest I leave attached. The flies can rebuild whatever bits I removed in a day anyway. They're efficient little breeders. I tighten the loose tubing clamp for good measure, then I wriggle out backwards from the hatch. As I emerge, wiping gunk from my hands on an already filthy rag, I'm greeted by Guret's rasp. Pressure at 65%. That will do, acolyte. Happy to help, Magos, I say, sliding off the gun housing. I doubt he's truly happy in any sense, but he seems content the guns will function. He doesn't reply, already scuttling away on his multi-legs to log the next problem on his slate. I lean against old Grin's big barrel for a moment, catching my breath and letting a few stray flies crawl out of my hair. Just another morning fix on the plague ship. Another minor triumph over entropy, albeit a very temporary one. Everything falls apart here, and we patch it up with equal parts elbow grease and blasphemy. I glance out one of the narrow viewports above the gun deck. Outside, through the thick stained plasteel, I see only the swirling, kaleidoscopic colors of the warp. Right, I almost forgot. We're still in the immaterium, sailing the currents of chaos toward our next destination. Hard to tell time in here. It could be hours or days until we reach real space. The view outside is a riot of sickly greens and bruise purples, streaked with unnatural light. It actually matches the interior decor of the ship quite well. I watch the warp boil and churn beyond the hull. Once that sight would have filled me with dread. Navigating the warp is perilous and terrifying to any sane soul. But to me now it's almost soothing, like watching a thunderstorm from a sheltered porch. Of course, safe is relative. The only thing between that madness and me is the ship's Geller field, assuming it's fully functional. If it flickers, well, we might get some unwelcome visitors indeed, but that's a worry for another time. My stomach gurgles, reminding me that one ladle of stew isn't a lot. But it'll hold me for now. Actually, it might have been the stew complaining. Sometimes the food tries to escape after you eat it. I've had that happen. I clamp a hand over my belly just in case something attempts to crawl up my throat. The shift continues. I spend the next few hours checking other gun components, oiling one of the traverse motors with a special viscous slime that seems to keep the rust at bay, and replacing a few corroded bolts on the casing. Routine stuff. A couple of other maintenance workers join me in the bay, eventually Grend and Oleg, two hulking brutes whose mutations lent them extra arms, useful for carrying heavy shells. They nod in greeting, their expressions as blank as ever. I suspect they lost their tongues some time ago. They never speak. They start loading plague-burst shells onto racks, likely prepping for a possible upcoming action. I make a mental note. If they're restocking ammo, the officers expect we'll need the guns soon, possibly an attack or raid on the horizon. By the time my maintenance shift finally wraps up, what passes for evening aboard the ship has arrived. The next shift's crew filters in to relieve us, and I wipe the grease and grime from my hands. With the guns tended and everything as ready as it can be, there's not much to do now but wait until we reach our destination and receive orders. In the lull, I head back to the barracks to grab a little rest. The corridors I wander through are quieter at this hour. Only the low hum of the engines and an occasional distant clank accompany me. A few of the lumen strips have dimmed, casting the passage in a gloom relieved only by bioluminescent fungus clinging to the walls. Underfoot, my boots squelch on patches of slippery mold that have colonized the deck. The air feels heavy and damp, but after the heat of the gun deck, the relative coolness is welcome. I pass a section where an overhead pipe drips a steady trickle of viscous glowing fluid onto the deck. It gathers in a shallow pool that illuminates a patch of wall with its sickly green light. Someone has drawn a crude symbol in the glowing spill, a fly with spread wings, Nurgle's sacred sign. It's honestly a rather pretty little mural, if you like luminescent slime art. The ship itself seems to be settling into a somnolent state. I swear I hear a slow thump-thump resonating through the hull, almost like a heartbeat at rest. Probably just the plasma drives idling. But on this ship, who knows? I find my bunk again. It still stinks of Sorgan's death and subsequent leakage, despite our attempt to wrap him up and toss him out. I collapse onto the cot, not even bothering to scrape away the bits of dried pus and mold left behind. I'm too tired to care. I pull my threadbare blanket over myself. The constant thrum of the warp engines is almost lullaby-like if you let it. My eyelids droop. In minutes, I'm drifting off. Despite the distant thuds and muffled screams that echo through the hull, there are always screams somewhere on this ship. It's oddly comforting. I dream, if you can call it that. I'm walking through a garden, but no garden of earthly delights. The trees are leafless and black, their branches dripping with viscid slime. A warm, humid wind blows, carrying with it the cloying scent of rot, and a sound almost like giggling. Bloated, green-black flies the size of my fist buzz lazily through the soupy air, which shimmers with spores. Yet I feel oddly at peace here. Ahead of me, a massive figure hunches over a colossal, rusted cauldron. A great unclean one of Nurgle's greater demons, stirs the pot with a gigantic wooden ladle, humming a jovial tune in a voice like a congested tuba. Its bulbous form is pustule-covered, hideously corpulent, yet strangely merry in its corruption. Nurglings caper at its feet, catching drips from the cauldron and smearing the foul brew over each other, squealing in delight. Far beyond the cauldron, I glimpse a colossal, rotting oak tree rising out of the bog, its skeletal branches sagging with bulbous fungal growths and its trunk oozing slime. The air around that diseased tree is thick with insects. I can see swarms of tiny flies, spilling from hollow knot holes like pollen shaken loose in a breeze. The demon notices me and lets out a wet, affectionate chuckle. "Ah, welcome, my child," it gargles, voice both nauseating and gentle. It beckons me closer with one swollen, claw-tipped hand, inviting me to peer into the cauldron. I approach without fear. Peering over the rim, I see the brew inside a thick, bubbling soup of indescribable filth. Swirling in that muck are faces, fleeting reflections that form on the oily surface. I see myself, younger and terrified. I see Grim cackling with that half-toothless grin of his. I see Jory, the new recruit, eyes wide with fear. The images ripple and vanish among rainbow slicks of pus and floating clumps of rot. All the while, the great unclean one watches me, its rheumy eyes gleaming with pride. It dips the ladle into the mixture and offers it toward me. The ladle is overflowing with the foul concoction, chunks of something bobbing in it. The smell wafting from that ladle is unbearable and irresistible all at once. I gag and salivate in the same breath. "Drink, little one," the demon coos, like a kindly grandfather offering a dose of medicine. The ladle inches toward my lips, the putrid stew within writhing with life. Slowly, I reach out. I jolt awake to the sound of panicked shouts echoing down the corridor. For a moment, I lie there in the dark, heart pounding, unsure if I'm still dreaming. The rancid sweetness of that garden still clings to my nostrils, or maybe it's just the usual odor of our barracks. Either way, my brief respite is over. The shouting intensifies. I fling off my blanket and grab the rusted pipe I keep by my bunk. Old habits die hard. Around me, other crew are stirring, cursing, or yelling in alarm. A distant crash reverberates through the metal halls, followed by a gurgling shriek that raises every hackle on my plague-ridden body. "What in the seven hells is that?" someone yells from a neighboring berth. I exchange a glance with Grim, who is already up and pulling on a mildewed tunic. We both know chaos when we hear it, and I have a sickening suspicion about who or what this is. We rush out into the dim corridor. A knot of crew has formed just down the passage, brandishing blades, shock prods, anything at hand. They're circled around something or someone thrashing on the floor. A chilling, warbling howl echoes off the bulkheads. It's Jory, or rather what's become of Jory, the poor lad from earlier whose neck had sprouted a tentacle. It seems Grandfather Nurgle's gift to him has bloomed horribly. His body convulses and twists, limbs elongating and warping in unnatural ways. That little tendril is now a thick, sucker-tipped appendage flailing from his collar. His right arm has split into a mass of writhing feelers, and one of his eyes has swollen into a bulging, bloodshot orb, while the other has sunk into a pus-filled cavity. He's in the throes of a full-blown chaos mutation, sliding rapidly into the mindless horror of spawndom. 2 crew members are already down. One lies motionless with his neck at an ugly angle, probably snapped like a twig. Another is slumped against the wall, clutching a savaged, bleeding leg and whimpering. Jory, the thing that was... Jory bellows again, a gurgling, multi-tonal roar as a barbed tentacle whips out from his body. The crowd of onlookers surges back to avoid the lashing tendril. "Grab him! Pin the bastard!" Mara appears, shoving her way forward with a hooked chain in hand. Her one good eye glints with excitement. Mara loves a good tussle. A few braver souls, myself included, steel ourselves and move in on the mutated crewman. It's like trying to wrestle a demonic octopus. Jory's mutating form lashes out wildly. A barbed tendril catches one crewman around the waist and slams him into the bulkhead with a bone-crunching thud. Another crew member jabs with a shock prod, eliciting an ear-splitting screech from the spawn, but not slowing it much. The corridor lights flicker crazily, as if sharing in the frenzy. Grim manages to loop his chain around one of Jory's distended ankles. "Help me pull," he wheezes. I latch on, and together we yank, toppling the wriggling figure to the deck. Others pile on, trying to hold down whatever flailing limb they can without getting bitten or entangled in tentacles. Jory's face, Emperor preserve us. It's hardly a face now lunges up from the pile, jaws snapping. His teeth have elongated into curved fangs. With a horrifying crunch, he chomps down on a crewman's forearm, biting clean through muscle and bone. The victim howls as we yank him back, leaving a chunk of his arm in Jory's mouth. Mara responds by driving a sharpened spike through Jory's cheek, pinning his head to the deck. The mutant gurgles, black ichor sputtering from the wound. Even prone and partially pinned, he's hideously strong. It takes 6 of us straining to keep him down. I'm atop what used to be his chest, wrestling a tangle of rubbery tentacles that have erupted there, my hands slipping on putrid slime. My mind is oddly calm, working pragmatically. This isn't Jory anymore, I remind myself. If anything, we're doing him a kindness putting him down. A pair of thunderous booms echoes down the corridor, shotgun blasts. 2 hulking shapes stomp into view, pushing aside bystanders. Plague Marines. Of course, the commotion drew them. Without a word, one of the Astartes raises a massive blunt-ended bolter and fires point blank. The explosive shell hits Jory's writhing torso and detonates with a dull whomp. Gore showers the walls and us. The thrashing immediately lessens. Jory's lower half is now a crater of smoking flesh. The second Marine steps forward and calmly plants his boot on what's left of Jory's head. There's a sickening crack as skull and floor meet with force. The mutant's tentacles give one last twitch and then slump, finally still. "Clean that up," the plague marine growls through his Vox grill, utterly unfazed. He casually ejects the spent shell casing from his bolter. His companion lets out a raspy chuckle that reverberates in his helmet. They turn and tromp away, apparently satisfied that the excitement is over, and probably annoyed that we interrupted whatever they were doing. We mortals are left panting in the aftermath. One of Jory's severed appendages still twitches on the floor until Mara spears it with her spike like pinning a snake. I roll off the now motionless bulk of what was once a terrified young man, wiping viscous fluid from my face. I feel oddly sad for a moment. Jory lasted less than a day aboard before his body rebelled against him. Grandfather's blessings are not always gentle. Grim spits a glob of something, half phlegm, half mutant tissue, and shakes his head. Damn. And I had 10 thrones on Jory, making it through the week. Leave it to Grim to turn it into dark humor. A few of us actually laugh a short, barking laughter of stress and relief. Mara yanks her spike free, and a chunk of Jory's former head comes with it, stuck on the blade. She grimaces and kicks it off. "All right, show's over. Get this mess to the maggot pits before it starts attracting, well, more maggots." There's a ripple of groans and chuckles, half joking, half serious as we set to the grisly work. We shovel the remains of Jory into a sack, what we can gather anyway. There's a lot of him spread around. We probably miss a few toes or tentacles that wriggled into a corner, but it will be fine. The ship will absorb those on its own. We drag the lumpy sack down the corridor toward the disposal hatch. A couple of Nurglings scamper alongside, snickering and poking at the sack until one of the crew swats them away. As we're heaving the remains down the corpse chute, a vertical shaft that leads straight to the lower deck's maggot pits, a crackle comes over the ship's Vox speakers. "All hands, prepare for emergence!" That's the bridge, signaling that we're about to leave the warp and enter real space. Timing couldn't be better, just in time to toss out the trash and get to battle stations. We hurriedly push the sack into the hatch and slam it shut. There's a distant wet splat a few seconds later in the depths, Jory's final landing. I wipe my brow with the back of my hand, smearing blood and sweat across it. Around me, a few others are hastily muttering litanies of readiness or checking weapons. Me, I just take a deep breath of the fetid air and brace myself against the wall. A deep shudder runs through the ship. The background noise of the warp drives changes pitch, winding down. Moments later, a violent lurch nearly knocks me off my feet as reality reasserts itself. The whole vessel seems to groan. The lights flicker, then stabilize. In my gut, that nauseating inside-out twist signals that we've just translated out of the immaterium. The vivid, unnatural colors outside the portholes bleed away, replaced by the cold, distant pinpoints of real stars. Transitioning from the immaterium always feels like your organs flip inside out, though given how rearranged mine are at this point, it's not as bad as it used to be. We've arrived wherever our target is. So it is an attack then. My heart, or whatever is left of it that still pumps, gives a little thump of excitement and dread. After all this drifting through the void, we're finally at our destination. I peer out a grime-clouded viewport again, squinting. There, yes, I see the dull glow of a sun and a few spherical shapes against the black. Planets. One of those is presumably our objective, soon to be blessed with our particular brand of misery. I wonder how many worlds have already tasted this fate. In our own plague fleet, we've raised perhaps a dozen planets in the years I've served agri-worlds, mining outposts, even a shrine world. That one was especially satisfying. Their prayers sure didn't save them. And we're just one small vector of Grandfather's grand contagion. Across the galaxy, in war zones and besieged sectors, Other champions of Nurgle spread his gifts. Whole subsectors are rotting from within. I've heard whispers that even Ultramar, the realm of the vaunted Roboute Guilliman, now festers with plagues unleashed by Mortarion himself. The thought makes me grin behind my rebreather. Yes, all throughout the Imperium of Man, decay blossoms. Now it's this world's turn to join the fun. My gaze is drawn to a pale blue-green orb not far off. Could that be it? From space, it looks almost peaceful. Poor fools down there. They probably have no idea what's coming. "All right, you lot, stop gawking at the stars," comes an abrupt shout behind me. Startled, I turn to see an overseer at the bay door. Falkis, master of the gunnery crews for this deck. He's got a rebreather strapped to his face, the lucky bastard, fewer smells for him, and is tapping a rusted baton against the metal frame to get our attention. "Gun crews, stand to your positions. Loaders to loading stations, maintainers final check, and await firing coordinates from the bridge. Move it," he barks. Grend and Oleg move immediately, carrying shells to the elevators. I seal up my toolkit and double-check everything on the guns is in place. I catch sight of one of the Plague Marines, the one with the horned helmet we saw earlier, entering at the far end of the bay, supervising the arming of some plague warheads. The presence of a Marine on the gun deck means this is serious. They're here to ensure maximum carnage, and perhaps to personally revel in it. Falkis sees me lingering and narrows his one good eye. "You, maintenance rat, clear the deck if you're not needed. Go join the damage control team. We might have incoming fire soon. And by the rot, get your rebreather on." I snap to it. "Yes, sir." I pull my rebreather mask up from where it's hanging at my neck and secure it over my face. It fits poorly. The straps are half rotted, but it's better than nothing if the air fills with gas or the deck voids. Within minutes, I'm down a level, joining up with the standby damage control party. We muster in a small alcove off the main passage. Mara is already there, hefting a patch kit and an extinguisher unit. Kull, the stunted mutant who can literally eat fear, is grinning in anticipation, his blackened teeth chattering. Two others I don't know well are dragging a hose reel that drips algae green sludge, our idea of a fire suppressant foam. No one really speaks. We just nod at each other. We've drilled for this, as much as anything is ever drilled here. Brace for hits, plug holes, save what we can. A muffled thump reverberates through the hull our main gun's firing. I feel the vibration in my bones. A second later, a more distant crump signals impact on something likely the target's orbital defenses or ships. "All damage control teams, stand ready," crackles the Vox over our head. I tighten my grip on a support strut as the deck shudders. "Return fire already?" Another impact, this one much closer. The lights flicker. Somewhere a pipe ruptures with a squeal. The ship tilts slightly, then rights itself. Must be a glancing blow to our void shields or hull. "Damn, they're feisty," Mara mutters. She has a habit of chewing on a shard of metal when nervous. I see her stick one between her teeth now. Without warning, a colossal wham rattles the entire corridor, throwing me and several others against the wall. I hear the screech of metal twisting. The overhead lumens flicker off, plunging us into near darkness lit only by emergency sickly green glow strips. "Direct hit," someone coughs, picking themselves up. Alarms begin to wail, a low, warbling siren, accompanied by a babble of automated voxes listing compartments and pressure warnings. My ears ring, but I manage to orient. Smoke, or rather vaporized rust and dust, fills the hall. In the dim light, I see a section ahead where the corridor wall is buckled inward. Fluids are spraying from ruptured pipes, and a few panicked crew run past carrying stretchers. Mara waves her extinguisher. "Come on," she barks, taking off toward the damage. We follow, dragging our hose and kits. We round a corner into a scene of utter wreckage. Deck 7, Section 12 by the markings, starboard side. Same side our gun deck is on. A yawning hole has been torn in the hull here. I can actually see the starry void through a jagged gash about 2 meters wide in the bulkhead. The edges of the hole glow red hot, and I realize part of an exterior gun battery housing has been blasted clean off. Emergency bulkhead doors are half-slid shut around the breach, struggling to close but jammed by debris. Air is whipping out into space with a banshee howl. A crewman is clinging to a railing, legs flailing. His lower body is already past the breach, sucked into vacuum. Another crewman lies flat, fingers dug into a deck grate, screaming silently. The air near him is too thin to carry sound. I act on instinct. I throw myself prone and grab the man on the deck by his belt. Another of our team, cool with the fire-eating grin, hooks his clawed foot around a stanchion and grabs my ankle, anchoring us both. With my free hand, I snag a length of hose line and toss it toward the guy hanging on the railing. He sees it and somehow manages to wrap it around his arm. "Pull," Mara cries. Two of us haul with all our might. For a second, it feels like the vacuum will win, but then the emergency bulkhead finally slams shut a little more, reducing the outflow. We drag the rail clinger back inside just as the gap shrinks. His legs narrowly avoid getting sheared by the closing door. He collapses beside us, gasping for breath in the thin, cold air. Our masks are working overtime. I taste copper and realize my mask isn't filtering all the oxygen outflow. I feel a little lightheaded. But no time for that. Mara and Kul rush to a control panel on the wall, slapping a big red rune. With a groan, a secondary shutter descends over the breach, finally sealing it. Blessedly, the air stops escaping and the pressure stabilizes. Somewhat, it's still drafty. The corridor is a mess of twisted metal and scattered bodies. By Nurgle's mercy, or dark humor, many of those flung out into space were plague zombies we had stowed in that section ready for landing, so at least they don't mind the vacuum. A few are even still intact, floating off among the stars. I'll bet they're still alive in their own way out there. We immediately go to work on what we can fix. One of the pipes is spewing promethium potential fire risk. Cool, fearless, and fireproof, stomps over and literally starts sucking on the broken line, drinking the promethium. His eyes roll back in pleasure. He loves the taste, apparently. Either way, leak solved, for now. I pry open a wall panel to access the emergency sealant system. It should flood foam into the breach, but it's offline. Figures. I yank a manual release lever. With a thump, resinous foam begins pumping into the gaps around the secondary shutter, reinforcing it. Good. Mara and another guy are spraying extinguishers at some electrical fires that erupted from a bank of sparking conduits. The fires die under the gush of caustic slime. Our ears pop as pressure equalizes. The lights flicker back to life, dim but steady. The automated voice on the Vox calmly announces, "Compartment 712 sealed, breach contained." I slump against a bulkhead, catching my breath. That was a nasty hit. My suit's chronometer, a cracked old thing strapped to my wrist, indicates only a few minutes have passed since the bombardment began, but it felt longer. While some of the team continue shoring up the patch, I find myself in a brief lull. And in that quiet moment, perhaps due to adrenaline ebbing or the surreal calm after chaos, my mind drifts unbidden to the past. To the first time I experienced something like this when I was on the other side of a warship's hull, back when I was a terrified guardsman facing horrors I never imagined. I lean my head back against the cold metal and close my eyes, just for a second. Memories flood in, and I don't resist them. I remember the day my old life ended and this grotesque rebirth began. It wasn't that long ago, though it feels like a different era entirely. Back then, I was a different man, cleaner, naive, fervently loyal to the Golden Throne. Yes, I was one of the Emperor's own, a soldier of the Astra Militarum, Private Talus of the 145th Cadian Regiment, to be precise. We were stationed on a quiet agri-world called Furlan's Hope, a backwater planet of green fields and simple folk, hardly the front lines of any major war. It was the kind of verdant, peaceful world I'd imagined retiring to someday. I remember the sweet smell of actual fresh air on morning patrols, the feel of a crisp, clean uniform, not yet tattered or stained, the reassuring weight of my last gun. Emperor, we even complained about boredom, can you imagine? We thought garrison duty on a peaceful world was a hardship because we were missing the glory of battle elsewhere. Fools we were. Our outpost was a modest fortress temple near a farming town. I had friends, then real friends, with whom I'd share smokes and laugh about home. One was Corporal Janes, a tall woman with a scar on her cheek who always beat me at cards. Another was Mervek, a fresh-faced kid who carved little imperial aquilus out of wood to pass the time. We all figured we'd serve out our tour here, protecting farmers from the odd bandit at most, then rotate to a more exciting posting. The excitement found us instead, or rather the horror did. I recall the night it all began. A strange storm rolled over Furlan's Hope. The sky turned a bilious green and purple, unnatural colors flickering in the clouds. We got word over the Vox that meteorite showers were inbound small ones. Nothing too concerning, said command. We were put on alert, but no one was panicking. Then came the impact tremors. Several objects slammed into the planet's surface across the region, one not far from our town. We were dispatched in a chimera transport to investigate what we assumed was a downed vessel or a larger rock. I was in the back of that APC with 9 other guardsmen, making nervous jokes to hide my unease as the vehicle bounced across the fields. Through the vision slits, I saw weird green lightning dancing on the horizon. We found the impact site in a fallow field. There was a crater, steaming in the night air. But what lay in it was no meteor. It was a pod, twisted metal still glowing hot, the color of tarnished brass and sickly green, marked with blasphemous runes we didn't recognize. Its doors had blown open on impact, and around it the ground was smeared with some viscous, foul-smelling sludge. Lieutenant Harrow, our CEO, ordered us to approach on foot. Guns up, nerves high, we fanned out. I remember hearing an eerie buzzing sound, like an unseen insect swarm, but chalked it up to my ears, ringing from the loud landing. We found them around the pod people, or things that had been people. The first one shambled right into our searchlight beam, a farmer from the town, I realized, but changed. His skin was pallid and covered in oozing sores. His eyes were milky white. He opened his mouth and let out a moan that didn't sound human, then rushed at us with unnatural speed. Our sergeant yelled, "Contact front! Engage!" And then it was just flashes and chaos. Lass bolts lit up the night, spearing into the attackers. More figures lurched out of the shadows, men, women, even a couple of farmhand servitors, all transformed into pestilent mockeries of themselves. Some were missing chunks of flesh, yet kept coming. One of them, a woman with half her face rotten off, fell to my last fire but got up again moments later, shrieking. Private Mervek panicked and broke formation, and 2 of the things tackled him, tearing at his flak armor. He screamed. "Emperor, forgive me," I hesitated. I had never seen anything like it. By the time I put a lull burst through the creatures, Mervek was on the ground, intestines strewn like spilled noodles. He wasn't moving. We eventually neutralized the immediate wave of plague zombies, though we didn't know to call them that yet. But the Vox was crackling with panicked reports. Whatever this was, it wasn't just at the crater. The whole town was under attack. People were turning into monsters, or being killed by them. In the distance, an alarm klaxon started wailing. Our squad piled back into the Chimera and raced back toward town. I sat there in shock, Mervek's blood literally on my hands, as Corporal Janes reloaded her rifle with a jaw set in grim resolve. None of us spoke. What was there to say? We were all thinking of the folks in town, the baker we'd chatted with that morning, the children who waved at our patrol. An icy fear clutched my guts. By the time we reached the outskirts, the situation was full chaos, with a capital C, though I didn't realize it then. Buildings were on fire, infected villagers rampaged in the streets, attacking anything that moved. Pockets of PDF, Planetary Defense Force, and militia were making last stands in the town square, but they were vastly outnumbered by the plague-ridden horde. We disembarked and immediately joined the desperate effort to hold back the onslaught. It was like a nightmare. Former neighbors and friends, now mindless carriers of some hideous plague, hurling themselves onto our bayonets and barbed wire. The night was filled with gunfire, screams, and that damnable buzzing of flies that only grew louder. I remember Corporal Janes bellowing, "Hold the line! For the Emperor!" as she emptied a full auto burst into an oncoming mass of gibbering, pustulant townsfolk. They went down, but they got back up, limbs dangling, and kept coming. One came at me, a young boy, couldn't have been more than 12, his eyes clouded and a crusty froth on his lips. He lunged and bit at me, actually clamping his teeth onto my left forearm. Thank the throne I was wearing armored sleeves, but the pressure was immense and the horror of it nearly sent me into shock. I smashed the butt of my last gun into the kid's head on reflex. Once, twice, until he let go and fell. Half his face caved in, but even then he was still twitching, trying to crawl toward me. I retched, bile rising in my throat. This can't be real, I thought. Emperor, what is happening to these people? We fought for what felt like hours, likely only minutes. We gradually fell back towards the central chapel, which had sturdy walls and a gate. A ragged perimeter formed of guardsmen, PDF, and any uninfected townsfolk who could hold a weapon. By the time we reached that point, half our squad was down. Sergeant Pell had been literally torn apart by a mob of plague victims. I saw him detonate a grenade at his own feet as they overran him, taking a bunch out. And unfortunately, a couple of our guys, too. Corporal Janes had taken command, her face grim beneath spatters of someone else's blood. We barricaded the chapel doors as best we could. Inside, the pews were filled with wounded civilians. The local preacher was trying to tend them, but I could tell by the black veining and fevers that some were already infected. It was only a matter of time for them. Outside, the moans and shambling footsteps of the horde gathered again for another push. We had maybe 30 able fighters left against what sounded like hundreds. I realized I was shaking uncontrollably, not from the cold, though the night had a chill, but from raw terror. This was not war as I knew it. This was a waking nightmare of contagion and the walking dead. Corporal Janes clasped my shoulder, startling me. "Talus, get it together. They're coming again, and we need you." Her eyes searched mine. I swallowed and nodded, jaw clenched. The next assault blew in the stained glass windows of that chapel in a shower of colored shards. They poured through, howling, and we fired until our packs overheated. Someone was swinging a chainsword, I think a PDF lieutenant, and using it to hack off grasping limbs that reached through the broken windows. I remember a woman, one of the infected, lunging at me with startling speed. I narrowly avoided her nails raking my face and managed to jam my last gun forward, bayonet first, into her gut. She spewed foul black bile all over my hands, but still tried to claw my eyes out. Janes put a last bolt through her temple, finally dropping her. Janes gave me a curt nod, and we kept fighting side by side. It was hopeless. They just kept coming, and every defender who fell became another enemy moments later, rising with milky eyes and joining the attack from within. When our line finally collapsed, Janes grabbed me by the collar and dragged me, half in a daze, into a side vestry. "Fall back," someone screamed. Not that there was anywhere to fall back to. I stumbled through an archway and tripped over something, landing hard on stone. When I looked up, I realized I'd tripped over the preacher. He was dead, his throat ripped open, his prayer book still clutched in his hands. That absurd detail, his fingers still holding that book, burned itself into my mind. Janes hauled me to my feet. "Tallis, we have to move," she yelled, blood streaming from a cut on her scalp. We pushed out a side door into an alley. The sounds of slaughter from the chapel behind us. Emperor's mercy, those screams still echo in my darkest nightmares. We were effectively routed. "Command post is gone," Janes murmured, voice hollow. She keyed her microbead. "Any Imperial units, fall back to evac point Bravo. Repeat, fall back to Bravo." Only static answered. As we crept through the town, now eerily quiet except for distant shambling and feeding noises, I saw sights that shattered whatever hope I had left. Piles of bodies, many partially eaten. A PDF trooper impaled on a fence post, his insides hanging out while plague flies buzzed around. A mother cradling a corpse that might have been her child, both riddled with boils and mercifully still. Janes kept us going. There were 4 of us with her, maybe all that remained of the 145th Cadian on this world. I think I was in shock. My arm throbbed from the bite I'd taken, and dark lines were spreading from the wound. I tied a tourniquet as tight as I could and tried not to think about it. Our goal, such as it was, became simply to get out of that town and regroup somewhere, anywhere. Janes said something about heading to the hills to signal evacuation. In my daze, I just nodded and followed. We didn't make it far. As we skirted the town square littered with the smashed statues of Imperial saints and burning wrecks of our Chimera transports, I heard a new sound. A deep mechanical thum. Thum. Spotlights cut through the smoke from above. Evacuation? At last? I dared to hope for a second, thinking maybe a Valkyrie or Navy gunship had arrived. Through the haze marched giants in slate-colored armor, picking their way over the rubble. At first I rejoiced, Space Marines, angels of death, here to save us. I wasn't the only one. One of the other guardsmen with us sobbed in relief seeing their silhouettes. Then one stepped into the flickering light of a burning hab, and I saw the sigils on his armor. A trio of circles, like a fly's outline. His plate was encrusted with filth, and from it dripped foul slime. Not the gleaming saviors of the Adeptus Astartes at all. These were plague marines of the Death Guard, the agents of our misery made manifest. Janes swore, backing us up quietly into cover behind a toppled Aquila statue. "Emperor, protect us," she whispered. Likely for the last time in her life she uttered that prayer. The Marines had noticed movement us. There were 3 of them. One leveled a bizarre-looking firearm our way, a bloated weapon that gurgled even as it fired. A jet of noxious liquid sprayed out, enveloping the 2 guardsmen on my right. They screamed as their skin liquefied under the venom. In seconds they were down, bodies dissolving into puddles of slurry and melted armor. "Go! Run!" Janes yelled, practically throwing me backward. She and the last other trooper opened fire on the plague marines, last bolts sizzling against the giant in the lead. He barely seemed to notice. I will never forget what happened next. The lead plague marine, helmet marked with a single horn, strode forward and swung a massive rusted cleaver. It sheared right through Jane's raised lasgun, cleaving down into her shoulder. She screamed the first and only time I ever heard tough Corporal Jane's scream. The Marine followed up by backhanding her with his free hand, sending her crashing through a charred wooden door. At that moment, something in me snapped. Perhaps it was seeing Jane's, who had been my rock, go down like that. Perhaps it was the bite's infection reaching my brain. Perhaps plain terror finally broke me. I dropped my weapon and fell to my knees. I remember raising my hands, sputtering, "Please, mercy, please, Emperor, save Ma." The nearest plague marine loomed over me, the firelight dancing across his pitted armor. Up close, the stench radiating from him was unbelievable, a concentrated aura of rot that made the air ripple. Through his cracked visor, I saw a glimpse of the face beneath. Pallid, bloated flesh with tubes feeding into it, and eyes that burned with cruel amusement. He regarded me for a moment. I remember babbling, "Please, I surrender, I—" He tilted his head as if considering. Then that gurgling voice came out, amplified by his helmet's vox. "You fear death, little soldier." I was shaking so badly I couldn't even speak. My entire body felt cold. I managed a tiny nod, tears spilling down my cheeks, tears that burned in the chemical air. He made a noise, perhaps a chuckle. "If you do not wish to die," he rumbled, "then live to serve the plague god." I barely understood at that point. Serve? Plague god? Behind him, the other Marines were finishing off any remaining resistance. One fired a bolter point blank into the gut of the last PDF lieutenant, blowing him apart in a shower of gore. Another was in the process of blessing, read infecting, a cowering townsperson with some sort of injector rod, pressing it into the man's neck as he convulsed. I turned back to the giant before me. My mouth opened and closed, wordless. He leaned down, impossibly squat and broad. One armored gauntlet seized the front of my flak vest and lifted me clean off the ground. My feet dangled as he held me at eye level. I remember seeing my own terrified face reflected in the green lens of his intact eyepiece. He growled a single word, "Accept!" Then abruptly he tossed me down. I hit the ground on my backside hard. "Take him," the Marine said. Two filthy, plague-ridden cultists scurried forward out of the darkness like rats. They yanked away my las pistol and knife. I was in too much shock to resist. The plague marine lost interest in me then, turning to bark orders at someone else. The cultists half dragged, half led me toward the center of town, where one of their putrid dropships was hissing with cooling engines. I saw scores of other prisoners being herded, some wounded PDF, some townsfolk who hadn't been infected yet. We were the spoils of this horror, it seemed. I recall they tossed me in a cage on the lander, beside a feverish PDF trooper whose eyes were glazed and who coughed up blood on my boots without even noticing. I was numb. I'd lost a lot of blood from my bite wound. My head swam. All around, cultists chanted hymns to Nurgle as the vessel ascended, carrying us from everything we had known and loved into a nightmare. I don't remember much of the journey up to the Plague Fleet ship. I was fading in and out of consciousness, the fever from my infected bite making reality blur with visions of swarming flies and slithering tentacles. I do recall, at one point, lying in the darkness of the lander's hold, hearing the cries of others around me, and realizing my own voice was among those crying out. I was begging for the Emperor to save me. How quaint that seems now. We docked with the plague ship, though I didn't know that's what it was then, just an ominous bulk swallowing our lander. We were marched out, a line of stumbling captives, into the bowels of this very vessel. The air was hot, humid, and foul. I remember gagging immediately, which earned me a sharp prod from a screaming cultist brandishing a rusted polearm. What followed was a blur of processing. We were stripped, scrubbed with caustic fluids, which burned our skin and likely did nothing to sterilize us, and then individually brought before an altar in a chamber deep within the ship. That altar, Emperor, I'll never forget it. It was erected in a repurposed cargo bay under sickly green lanterns. A huge cauldron bubbled at its center, and the air was thick with sweet smoke that made my head swim. The altar itself was a mound of rotting skulls and rusted metal plates welded into an icon of Nurgle. The chanting of robed plague priests echoed off the steel walls. They brought us forward one by one. I watched the few ahead of me. A gibbering cult priest, face covered in boils and eyes gleaming with fanatic joy, would ask each prisoner if they would accept Grandfather Nurgle's gifts. Those who refused or hesitated met a swift end. Some were held down and drowned in the cauldron's boiling muck on the spot. But most, by then, were too broken or too terrified to refuse. They nodded, sobbed, screamed yes. My turn came. I was shoved to my knees before the high priest, a towering, disease-ridden figure draped in moldering robes. His voice gurgled through a Vox speaker mask, asking me loudly, "Do you accept the blessings of Nurgle and forsake the false emperor?" I was too weak to speak. The bite on my arm had swollen, my veins black. I likely looked half dead already. The priest loomed closer, impatient. I accept," I croaked, barely audible. The priest's lipless mouth curled in what might have been a smile. "Speak louder, child." Something in me snapped to attention, and with tears in my eyes, I raised my voice. I accept Nurgle's blessings. I don't want to die." My words echoed in that bay. A few prisoners nearby actually cried, perhaps in pity, perhaps relief for themselves. The priest clapped his bony hands together softly. "Then be welcomed, little one." Two acolytes came forward and hoisted a large, seeping wooden bowl from the cauldron. It was filled with a thick, noxious stew of effluence. The high priest took the bowl and, mumbling a prayer to Nurgle, brought it to my lips. "Drink deeply of Grandfather's gift," he intoned. I wanted to pull back, the smell was beyond foul, but one acolyte gripped my hair from behind, holding me firm. With little choice, I parted my cracked lips and the priest tipped the bowl. The stuff was impossibly bitter and sour and thick. I gagged as it flooded my mouth and poured down my throat. I coughed mid-gulp, sputtering, but they did not let up. "All of it, child," the priest urged, almost gently. I drank until the bowl was empty. How I kept it down, I don't know. My stomach immediately rebelled. I doubled over, retching. The acolytes held my arms so I couldn't purge even if I wanted to. Then came pain, excruciating, all-encompassing pain as the gift spread through me. I felt as if my veins were on fire, as if my insides were being eaten by acid and caressed by ice simultaneously. I convulsed on the floor, probably screaming I can't recall. The next clear memory I have is of lying in a heap with other new converts, hours or days later. Time lost meaning. Surprisingly, I was alive. More than alive, my bite wound had closed up, leaving only a puckered black scar. My fever had broken. I felt, well, not healthy, but stable. They had put filthy new garments on us, rough-spun pants and tunics that carried the stench of previous owners who likely died in them. Around my neck hung a wooden talisman with Nurgle's triple fly symbol. I suppose that marked me officially as one of them. From there, it was servitude and survival. We learned the routine of the unchanged, mortal slaves, aboard the ship. We were menials, the crew who toiled in the belly of the vessel, yet also we were now chosen, in a way. carriers of Nurgle's plague, living testaments to his mercy. The priests and overseers kept telling us we were fortunate that unlike the billions who simply die screaming of these plagues, we had been spared to spread grandfather's gifts further. They also regaled us with tales of Nurgle's greatest triumphs, legends of entire systems decimated by his plagues. We heard of the ancient plague of unbelief that once raised the dead to devour the living across whole sectors, of the ulcerous wars waged by the Death Guard Legion throughout the millennia, and of countless worlds still writhing under Nurgle's blessings. At first, these stories horrified the part of me that had been a loyal Imperial soldier, but as corruption sank deeper into my soul, I began to feel a twisted pride. I was part of this legacy of rot and ruin now. I can't say I felt fortunate right away. The first weeks, or months, time blurs in the warp, were agony and madness. My body changed sores and coughs became my new normal. The blessings within me assured I'd never be fully well again, but also never truly terminal. I simply existed in a state of perpetual sickness that oddly sustained itself. I spent those early days lurching between feverish and numb, often curled in a corner of the barracks, sobbing when no one watched. I thought of Corporal Janes, of Mervek, of home. I mourned them, and I mourned the man I had been. Yet each time I broke down, the ship responded in its way. Once, while I was weeping quietly in a dark nook, a tiny Nurgling waddled up to me and placed something in my hand, a moldy rag doll it had found. It patted my knee and squeaked something like a purr before scampering off. Emperor knows why, but that absurd, grotesque little act actually comforted me for a moment. In the end, despair or hope didn't matter. Only acceptance did. I befriended a couple of fellow survivors turned slaves, like Grim, a former PDF sergeant from another world, and Mara. She had been a Hiver Gang member captured somewhere. We bonded over shared pain and grim humor. We would whisper our old life stories to each other in the dark, half to remember who we were, half to remind ourselves that we still could remember. Over time, I stopped thinking of escaping or being rescued. That part of me went silent. The Imperium became a distant memory, a fever dream of a past life. You see, here on this plague ship, as awful as it was, there was a perverse sense of belonging. I was alive when, by all rights, I shouldn't be. I had a family of sorts in my fellow slaves, and even in our overlords, terrifying as they were, they called us little brother, or little sister at times, and meant it almost affectionately. It's disturbing how Nurgle's corruption can twist even social bonds into something both grotesque and genuine. The cultists and priests taught us their hymns and litanies. Eventually, I found myself joining in sincerely. Perhaps it was the fear of punishment at first, or the slow eroding of my old faith. But soon enough, I sang the praises of decay because I wanted to. When you repeat a thing enough and see that no lightning bolt smites you indeed, that you feel a queer solace in it, it becomes normal. I recall the first time I laughed again, truly laughed. It was a few months in. We were tasked with disposing of some particularly malodorous waste barrels in the aft holds. The stench was beyond belief. One of the newer guys was turning green, well, greener than usual, and he blurted, "By the throne, this smells worse than the lieutenant's cooking back in training." It was such a stupid, normal remark that I snickered. Then Grim cracked up, a wet, hacking chuckle. Before I knew it, a half-dozen of us were laughing like it was the funniest joke in the galaxy. It wasn't, of course, we were probably half-mad from the fumes, but that was the moment I realized the last shreds of my old self had died, and something new was in its place. Someone who could laugh while shoveling rot, because what else are you gonna do? Thus went my induction into the Plague Father's service. Horrific as it was, I came to not just accept it, but oddly cherish it. As the priests love to say, what is the greater madness, to be sick and happy, or healthy and desperate? I, like my new brothers and sisters, chose the former. Nurgle had claimed me body and soul, and in doing so, paradoxically, set me free from fear. I no longer dreaded pain or death. Those had become old familiars, almost friends. When you have nothing left to lose, not your health, not your future, not your mortal soul, you gain a certain freedom. A dull contentment, even. So there I was, once a proud Imperial Guardsman, now an infectious cog in the plague, God's great engine. And strangely, I was at peace with it. "Talus! Talus! Snap out of it!" Mara's voice and a firm slap to my shoulder jolt me back to the present. I blink rapidly. I'm still leaning in that corridor on Deck 7, next to the patched-up breach, the emergency lights blinking eerie green. The memory haze recedes, and I'm faced with Mara's scarred face peering at me quizzically. "You all right?" "You looked gone there for a bit," she says. There's an almost gentle concern in her tone. I give a small, reassuring nod. "I'm fine, just thinking." She grunts, then manages a tight grin. Thinking can be dangerous, you know, especially about before. "Yeah," I reply with a faint smirk. "Only rot ahead, eh?" "That's the spirit." She pats my arm and rises. "Come on, Talus. Translation's done. Orders should be coming in any moment. We best get ready to greet our visitors proper." By visitors, she means whoever we're about to go infest planetside. I push off from the wall. My limbs ache, but steadily the adrenaline returns, battle-coming adrenaline replacing recollection-born fatigue. Sure enough, a few seconds later, the ship's voxcasters blare. All hands stand to deployment stations. I hear the clanking of Plague Marines' heavy steps somewhere distant, moving purposefully. The ship thrums in a new way, the distinct shift from cruising to attack posture. Mara and I and the rest of Damage Control gather our gear and hurry toward our assembly point for boarding parties. As we jog through the corridors, crew around us are springing into action. Poxwalker holding pens are being hauled up to launch bays. There's a chorus of muffled moans from within the sealed containers. Fresh plague zombies ready to be unleashed. Cultists are arming themselves with rusted autoguns, checking that their blades are sufficiently coated in toxins. By the time we reach the mustering zone outside Hangar 13, a palpable energy one might even call it excitement permeates the air. For all our grim talk, many of us live for these moments. This is our purpose now, to bring plague and despair to the enemy. And by the Plague Father, we're good at it. We spill into the hangar deck where our assault craft await. The place is a frenzy of motion and noise and stench. It's illuminated by flashing amber battle lights and the intermittent glow of welding torches as last-minute fixes are made to our landing craft. Nurglings scurry underfoot, some carrying replacement parts or ammunition in their little claws like dutiful gremlins. Towering Plague Marines are there too, making final preparations. I spot our champion, the Lord in command of this mission, Lord Scorpios. They call him standing atop a pile of crates and addressing a knot of his plague-armored warriors. I can't hear him from here, but the way he raises his dripping power fist and the Marines thump their chests tells me enough. He's rallying them for the coming fight. We mortals congregate by assigned squads. I'm in Assault Team Fester 2, lovely name I know. There are maybe 50 of us mix of cultist fighters and unchanged crew who can hold a gun. We check our weapons. I've traded my maintenance kit for a carbine and 3 grenades that slosh ominously, plague grenades full of some virulent brew. At my hip is a long knife. its blade stained with venom from the last engagement. I never bothered to clean it. Why waste good venom? Grim appears, sliding into place beside me in the throng. His face is painted with a mixture of soot and gangrene-hued pigment, a sort of war paint some of us adopt. "Look who decided to join the party," he teases, elbowing me. "All set, friend?" I give a curt, confident nod. I've donned my own rebreather mask. Can't forget that it'll filter out most of our own miasma and hopefully keep any desperate Imperial chemical response at bay. Around me, folks are psyching themselves up in various ways, some murmuring dark prayers, some jabbing themselves with combat stims, or in our case, combat infections like a particularly nasty syringe of something that heightens pain tolerance. Amid the post-battle bustle, a reedy voice rises in a wet chant, one of the plague priests leading the prayer of thanks for our imminent glory. Instantly, dozens of plague-ridden voices join in, including mine. "Blessed be the boil that bursteth," we croak in unison, "and blessed be the rot that purifies. Grandfather, we thank you for this bountiful decay." The prayer echoes through the bay, a dirge-like chorus of devotion to the Lord of Pestilence. I find myself grinning behind my mask as I chant along. Once I would have found this scene utterly horrifying. Now it feels as natural as breathing. Wheezing, in my case. It's our way of giving thanks preemptively for the good work we're about to do. Moments later, with a screech of hydraulics, the great hangar doors begin to grind open. Beyond, the void shields shimmer against the darkness of space, and I can see the curve of the planet below, now much larger and looming beneath us like a ripe fruit ready to drop. A clarion, well, more like flatulent, horn signal booms. Time to load up. Our crowd surges toward the waiting transports. A swarm of poxwalkers is herded into a specialized drop cage, their horrific forms packed tightly and locked, ready to be the vanguard dropped literally onto the enemy. Nothing softens up a defense like a rain of plague zombies landing among them. Meanwhile, we humans file into our assault landers and boarding torpedoes according to plan. Greem and I end up in Lander 7, along with about 30 others of Fester 2 and a trio of Plague Marines assigned to oversee bolster us on the ground. We strap into crude benches along the hull. The Marines remain standing, magnetizing their boots to the deck for the descent. I glance to my left and see Jory scratch that. Gerald is his name. Odd how quickly I forgot. The young lad I helped induct earlier today. Yes, here he is, already geared up in makeshift armor. Pieces of a PDF flak vest hammered into shape. He's clutching a rusty las gun and muttering a quiet mantra. Despite the fervor of earlier, I see a twinge of nervousness in his eyes. I nudge him. "First drop?" I ask through my mask. He nods, swallowing hard. A trickle of pus leaks from the corner of his mouth as he does. Side effect of the transformation, he'll get used to that drool. "You'll be fine," I assure him. "Stick by me. Remember, those below are the ones who should be scared. We're the monsters in the dark." I give what I hope is a reassuring chuckle. It comes out more like a gurgle, but he actually smiles and nods. "Good lad." A klaxon blares twice, two long, one short. That's our signal. The ramp of the lander swings shut with a clang, sealing us in a dim green-tinted interior lit by glow strips. Immediately, the smells of anticipation build. Sweat, chemical propellant, the coppery tang of blood. Someone is cutting sigils into their flesh down the row, too excited to wait. The craft jerks as it's lowered into launch position. I brace my boots against the floor and tighten my harness. Across from me, Grim gives a thumbs up. I return it. "Infections strapped in," a deep voice crackles over the internal vox. It's the pilot servitor in the cockpit using one of its limited pre-programmed phrases. "Strapped in and ready, aye," Mara calls out, banging a fist on the bulkhead. The Marines grunt affirmatively. My heart is thudding with that battle lust I have come to know and crave, the boiling blend of fear and ecstasy. A dribble of bile leaks from the corner of my mouth inside my mask. I swallow it back. Launch in 3, 2, 1. With a stomach-lurching whoosh, we are catapulted out of the hangar. Acceleration slams us against our restraints. Someone cackles wildly, might be Kull, who lives for this kind of thing. Through tiny viewports, I see streaks of fire. Defensive las beams from the ground stab past us. A distant explosion rocks the craft. Maybe one of the other landers got hit, or perhaps one of the orbital defense batteries just exploded under our bombardment. Our lander jolts and bucks. The pilot servitor likely has limited evasive capacity. Basically, it will just plunge and trust in Nurgle. Flak shrapnel pings off our hull. One piece punches through the thin skin of the lander, zinging around the compartment like an angry hornet before embedding in the wall. It slices a line across one cultist's cheek. He giggles and licks the blood, as if thankful for the little adrenaline bump. I can feel intense heat as we scream through the atmosphere. The hull rattles. A couple of rivets pop, letting in brief whistles of searing air. Someone starts vomiting from motion sickness. The vomit arcs in the microgravity and splatters on the ceiling. Immediately, a few Nurglings, thrill-seekers that they are, scamper across the ceiling to lap at the floating chunks. The absurdity makes me grin. 30 seconds, barks one of the Plague Marines, reading the drop timer. We all grip our weapons tight. The familiar 2-click ready signal goes down the line as we check safeties off. A hard thud impact. The whole compartment slams upwards as we hit the ground. A bit harder than planned, but nothing broke that wasn't already broken. The retro thrusters scream as they attempt to slow us at the last moment, tossing up dust and debris. "Go! Go! Go!" roars the lead Plague Marine, already wrenching the ramp lever. The assault ramp drops with a clang, and bright natural light floods in. For a heartbeat, none of us can see much beyond silhouettes and weapons flashes. Then our vision adjusts and reveals the chaos outside. We're in the midst of a sprawling Imperial outpost. The lander crushed a couple of Auspex array dishes where it came down. Alarms are blaring. Not far ahead, I see the base's main gates ajar and partially wrecked from an earlier shelling. Beyond them, more fire and smoke, likely the result of our orbital softening up. Last bolts crack past, forcing us to duck behind the ramp. The base's defenders, a mix of PDF and some Munitorum personnel judging by uniforms, have scrambled to respond to our arrival, and they're not welcoming us with tea. Our trio of Plague Marines stomp down first, heedless of loss fire pattering against their armor like angry rain. They form a spearhead and begin laying waste immediately. One raises a corroded meltagun and fires a sizzling beam that turns an oncoming sentinel walker into slag in an instant. Another Marine swings his great plague flail, smashing aside a group of shocked security troopers who had charged with bayonets. Fools brave, but fools. We fan out behind them, using their bulk as partial cover, and open fire with our own weapons. I pick out a cluster of defenders on a catwalk and send a trio of lass bursts their way. One man goes down, clutching his throat where my lucky shot found a chink. The base is a confusion of shouting and gunfire now. Through the dust, I see shapes shambling and lurching toward the inner defenses our Poxwalker vanguard, which must have been dropped just before us. They're already at the perimeter, falling upon the stunned outer pickets with feral ferocity. I almost feel pity for the poor sods out there. Being eaten alive by plague zombies is an ugly way to go. Then again, there's no pretty way in war. A heavy stubber on a watchtower opens up, peppering our area. Mara yells and points. She and Kul swing our hose-like sludge cannon around and unleash a stream of caustic slime at the tower. It splatters the gunner, who falls, screaming and clawing at his melting face. We're pushing in further now, step by bloody step. The plague marines at the front wade through incoming fire. I swear I see one take a direct hit from a missile launcher. A bloom of flame engulfs him, and when it clears, he's still marching, a chunk of armor blown away to reveal pulsing, rotten flesh beneath, but utterly unfazed. He responds by hurling a glob of something vile from a canister, likely a blight grenade of his own. It detonates amidst a group of entrenched PDF, and I see limbs fly and hear gagging cries as the disease mist envelops them. We press on. I move from cover to cover, a burnt-out chimera here, a stack of toxic barrels there, firing as I go. Gerald is right on my heels, firing his las rifle in semi-auto bursts toward anything in an Imperial uniform. Good lad, he's keeping his head. Somewhere to the left, a section of the hab block collapses with a tremendous crash. Probably our poxwalkers breached the plasma reactor or something. A shockwave rolls across the base, knocking many flat, me included. I shake off the dizziness and scramble up, laughing aloud. Emperor, I'd forgotten the sheer rush of a full-scale plague assault. It's bedlam, it's carnage, it's perfect. Ahead, I see the base's command bunker, a reinforced hab with antennas, some now bent or fallen. That must be where any remaining leaders are holed up. Our objective is likely to secure or destroy it. "Fester 2 on me!" I shout, rallying our squad. A number of us coalesce behind a damaged chimera, reloading magazines or swapping power packs. A few brave or suicidal base defenders make a sally at us from a side door, led by a commissar of all things, his crisp uniform incongruously clean amidst the filth. "For the Emperor, no mercy!" he screams, firing off a bolt pistol that explodes the head of a cultist next to me. I give him points for guts, but that pretty coat is about to get very dirty. Gerald and Grim cut down the guardsmen, flanking the commissar with disciplined crossfire. The commissar roars in defiance and charges at me, of all people, power sword raised high. I parry desperately with my lascarbiane. The blade shears my weapon's barrel clean off, leaving me holding a sparking stump. He raises the sword for a killing blow, staring right into my goggled eyes with hatred. I see his lips move. "Die, heretic!" Then a tentacle, yes, a slimy tentacle, loops over the commissar's shoulder and around his neck, yanking him backward with brute force. The sword tip slashes inches from my face, cutting only air. Behind the commissar, Gerald stands, eyes alight with zeal, one of his arms grotesquely transformed into a rubbery tentacle, clearly his blessing developing fast under stress. With that tentacle, he hoists the choking commissar aloft, like a hanging meat carcass. The commissar gargles, dropping his sword to claw at the appendage, crushing his throat. Gerald grins fiercely and swings the man headfirst into a concrete pillar. I hear the neck snap across the tentacle's coils. The commissar goes limp. Gerald tosses the corpse aside, panting. His tentacle arm then retracts slightly, coils loosening as if the rage left it. He looks at me almost sheepishly, as if unsure whether he'll be praised or scolded. I burst out laughing, a slightly hysterical sound through my mask. "Emperor's throne, Gerald. Good job." I clap him on the back. The recruit beams with pride, ichor dripping from his newly formed limb. "No mercy, right?" He echoes the commissar's words in mocking tone. Attaboy, he's already developing a dark sense of humor. We press on, stepping over the commissar's crumpled form. A few yards ahead, the plague marines are battering down the command bunker's door. One of them has affixed a breaching charge that's belching corrosive gas to eat through the plasteel. The remaining defenders inside are firing out of firing slits, but sporadically most are likely reeling from the loss of leadership and sheer shock at how quickly their station fell into ruin. A few brave shots from an autocannon ping off a plague marine's corroded power armor, scarcely slowing him. One of the giants even takes a direct hit from a shoulder-fired crack missile. The blast blows a gaping chunk of rotten flesh and ceramite from his midsection, but the towering warrior only staggers for a heartbeat before continuing his advance, releasing a bellowing wet laugh. How do you stop foes who simply will not die? The answer for these poor defenders is, you don't. The remaining defenders inside are breaking. I see some throwing down their weapons, others making a desperate dash for a drainage ditch at the periphery of the base, only to be tackled and torn apart by waiting poxwalkers lurking there. Within minutes, it's effectively over. The bunker door comes crashing down after a couple of concentrated melta blasts. Our plague marines stomp into the smoke-filled command center, bolters firing. There's some brief last fire from within, a few screams, then silence except for a dull clunk, which likely was the last officer's head hitting the floor. "Secure the interior! Slaughter any holdouts!" gurgles Lord Scorpios as he steps through the wrecked doorway, dripping gore from his armor. A few of our cultists roar in triumph and follow inside to mop up. A klaxon somewhere is still bleating, but no one responds to it now except a chorus of groans and crackling flames. I lower my weapon, well, what's left of it without a barrel, and survey the courtyard around us. Bodies everywhere, some still twitching, some being feasted upon by poxwalkers who couldn't wait for a fresh meal. The air is thick with the smells of charred flesh, chemicals, and the omnipresent undertone of rot that we carry with us. I take in a deep breath through my filters and exhale in satisfaction. We did what we came to do. Another outpost falls to despair and decay. "All right, start gathering the spoils. Round up any survivors," hollers Scorpios as he emerges from the bunker, dragging the half-corrupted body of what looks like the base commander by the ankle. The officer is somehow still alive, wheezing through a collapsed jaw. Scorpios tosses him to a pair of waiting cultists. "Prep this one for the next fleet batch," he instructs. The poor sod's going to become a living incubator for some new concoction, no doubt. Behind me, a few of our guys are already corralling the last handful of defenders who surrendered. A frightened Medicae woman, 2 wounded PDF troopers, and a gray-haired Adeptus admin with a broken arm. They kneel, trembling as our cultists strip them of any weapons and bind their hands. My eyes settle on a young PDF soldier among them who, oddly enough, is smiling. My heart almost skips. He reminds me of myself, ironically, that final night on Furlan's Hope. Perhaps he too realizes that for him to still be alive now, maybe the plague god has plans. Grim notices my stare. "What are you thinking, Talos?" he asks in a low tone, prodding one of the kneeling captives with his shotgun idly. I tilt my head. Just that it's recruiting time again. I nod towards the bound captives. Let's see who wants a second chance. Grim snorts a laugh. "You soft-hearted recruiter, you!" I approach the small cluster of prisoners. They flinch at my approach, can't blame them. I'm a ghastly sight, I'm sure. Armor spattered with gore, mask splashed with who knows what. I crouch down slightly to meet the eyes of the gray-haired adept. "You have a choice to make," I rasp gently. "Embrace Grandfather Nurgle's gift, or suffer a lot before dying. I promise the former is the better path." The adept defiantly spits at me a bloody spittle that dribbles down my chest plate. I just chuckle. I'll take that as a no. Next, I look to the medic woman. She shakes her head vigorously, tears in her eyes, muttering prayers to the Emperor under her breath. Fine. My eyes land on the young PDF trooper, the one who was oddly smiling. He meets my gaze and, to my surprise, nods almost imperceptibly. There's fear in his eyes, yes, but also that glimmer of a desperate spark, the will to live at any cost. I beckon him with one finger. "Stand!" He shuffles to his feet, bound hands out before him. I step close, lowering my mask so he can see my face, pallid, pox-marked, with milky eyes that somehow still have a spark of their own. "What's your name, guardsman?" I ask. "Hail, sir," he stammers. "Guardsman Hail," I say, loud enough for the others to hear. "Do you want to die here, writhing in agony? Or do you want to come with us and live free of fear?" A couple of the other prisoners start cursing him, telling him not to listen. Grim silences them with a backhand from his shotgun butt. Hale swallows, looking between me and his companions. I want to live. Wise lad, I smile. I reach into a pouch and pull out a small vial stoppered with wax. Inside, a murky liquid with floating black flecks gleams dully. "Drink this, and fear will never trouble you again." He trembles but manages to take the vial in his bound hands. He pops the cork and sniffs immediately, recoiling at the stench. I arch a brow. He steels himself, lifts it to his lips, and chugs it in 2 gulps. His reaction is immediate. Hale doubles over, coughing violently as the concoction hits his system. I motion, and 2 cultists catch his arms, easing him to the ground. The other prisoners watch in horror and fascination. Hale's body convulses, veins bulge dark under his skin, racing up his neck and across his face. He chokes, eyes bulging. For a moment, I worry I gave him too potent a dose. But then he inhales deeply and starts to laugh. A bubbling, thick laugh as black fluid drips from the corners of his mouth. He collapses onto his back, shuddering. The Medici woman screams at the sight, perhaps thinking he's dying. The older adept looks away in disgust, muttering a prayer. But I watch intently. Hale's laughing turns to coughing, then subsides. He goes limp, eyes closed. A long moment passes. Then Hale opens his eyes. They roll wildly, then focus. He blinks and slowly sits up, the cultists helping him. A slow grin spreads across his now grayish face. I'm alive, he whispers, almost in disbelief. "Yes, guardsman," I say, offering him a hand up. Careful, he's likely contagious to the uninitiated now. "Welcome to your new life." Hale stands, wobbling only a little. Already a boil is forming on his cheek, and one of his front teeth falls out as he runs his tongue over it. He doesn't seem to mind. In fact, he starts chuckling again. It doesn't hurt," he marvels, holding up his bound hands and staring at the black veins tracing under the skin. "I feel warm, happy." "That's grandfather's love," I say quietly. "It fills you, doesn't it?" He nods vigorously, a tear of what I think is joy mixed with pus sliding down his face. Thank you, sir," he manages to say, looking at me with something akin to reverence. Behind me, I hear Grim mutter, "And another one joins the family." I turn to the remaining prisoners. The adept is scowling in disgust, the Medici trembling. "Any other takers?" I ask amiably, holding up another vial. I have a few ready in case. They both spit at me this time. One spittle even hits my cheek and slowly slides down. I shrug. "Very well. Enjoy what's coming, then." With a nod from me, Grim casually blows the adept's brains out with his shotgun. The Medici woman screams and falls backward. Before she can even crawl away, a pack of Nurglings descends on her like feral animals. They giggle and tear at her with gleeful abandon. I don't watch. I'm already guiding our new recruit, Hale away from the scene. "Stick close to me, Hale," I tell him, handing him a fallen lasgun to replace his shackles, which we cut off. "I'll show you what comes next." He nods eagerly, shambling at my side like an excited puppy. Yes, he'll do fine. A few hours later, as the diseased sun of this world sets behind a pall of smoke, we gather back at the landing zone for extraction. The base lies in ruin, its occupants either slain or converted. Our mission here is done. Others will come to pick it clean or use it as a foothold. We move on to spread the plague elsewhere. I stand there amid the wreckage, Hale and Gerald chatting animatedly beside me, comparing the boils they've grown of all things. Grim is chewing on a fungus ration, humming an off-key plague hymn. Around us, the surviving unchanged are assembling under Overseer's watchful eyes, dragging any useful loot or captives towards the dropships. The Plague Marines stride among us like living tanks, unconcerned by anything now that the battle's won. The sky is aflame with the dying light, casting an amber glow through the drifting chemical clouds. It actually looks beautiful, in a polluted sort of way. The scent of char and decay on the breeze is almost soothing. I catch myself in a moment of reflection. Standing on this raised Imperial outpost, surrounded by my grotesque comrades and our cackling demons, I feel content, fulfilled even. This is what my life is now. Not a cursed existence, as the Imperium would view it, but a purposeful one. With each world we sink into Nurgle's embrace, I further convince myself of the righteousness of our cause, or at least the inevitability of it. Where once I fought to protect a decaying, uncaring Imperium, now I fight to spread decay, and strangely, I care about that mission deeply. "Time to head home," Grim says, nudging me. Indeed, the signal to embark is being blown on a plague horn, a deep croaking bellow. Home. That word now means this plague-ridden ship of ours, the blessed filth, adrift in the stars. And I realize, as I herd my new charges and fellows back toward the boarding ramps, that I want nothing more than to return to its filth-encrusted halls, crawl into my moldy bunk, and rest up for the next adventure in the Grandfather's service. We embark once more, bloodied but victorious. As the lander lifts off, I gaze out a porthole at the devastation below, palls of green-black smoke, fires illuminating the night, the plague already visibly spreading in blooming patches of corruption, where our spores took root. Another world succumbs to the fly. Another success for the plague fleet. Back aboard the blessed filth, we disembark into the familiar dim rust-hued hangar bay. I'm hit with a wave of hot, foul air that smells like home. All around, the hangar teems with activity. Plague Marines reporting to Lord Scorpios with trophy heads or recovered data slates. Cultists carting off captured supplies and weapons. Moaning wounded being dragged to the surgeon pits, some begging for another dose of Grandfather's mercy to keep them alive. They'll likely get it, if they're useful. I put an arm around Hale's shoulders and steer him along, guiding him through the controlled chaos. "Come on, let's get you settled in," I say. "There's an empty bunk somewhere with your name on it, and maybe some stew left in the pot." He nods enthusiastically, already drooling a bit. First signs of the appetite Nurgle's gift often brings a hearty hunger even for rotten fare. He's adapting quickly. Behind us, the hangar is alive with celebration in its own gross way. Amid the post-battle bustle, a reedy voice rises in a gargling chant, one of the plague priests leading the litany of victory. Instantly, hundreds of plague-ridden voices join in, echoing through the bay. "All praise to Nurgle, all rot is his blessing," they intone in a reverent drone. We add our voices to the throng, our words wet and jubilant. The sound of it warms the fetid air. As I escort our newest recruit through the hangar's archway, I can't help but smile. It's been a good day. We disappear into the bowels of the ship, making our way along a tendon-lined corridor that squishes pleasantly underfoot. In the distance, I hear the deep toll of the victory bell, a great rot-encrusted iron bell that hangs in the ship's chapel, rung only when Grandfather Nurgle is especially pleased. Its tone is low and resonant, vibrating through the metal like a reassuring heartbeat. I glance at Hale, already practicing a plague chant under his breath as he walks, and at Gerald, who is cheerfully scratching the pet tentacle sprouting from his arm. My family, such as it is. I feel proud. Another mission accomplished, another corner of the Imperium brought low, made ready to sprout new life in decay. And I played my part without a second's hesitation. If you had told me, the loyal Cadian I once was, that I'd end up like this, I'd have shot you for heresy. But here I am. And to be honest, I'm far happier than that dutiful guardsman ever was. In the grim darkness of the far future, I suppose there are far worse things than life aboard a plague fleet vessel. At least here, amid the rot and ruin, I'm never alone. I have Grandfather Nurgle's family all around me. And if that isn't a twisted kind of happy ending, I don't know what is. Blessed be the rot that heals, the plague that liberates. In decay, we are reborn.